All right. When studying world history, there are certain places and countries and regions of the world and cities that are kind of essential to understanding what's going on in history. So we're going to go over some of those really important places, and especially those that are uh, mentioned specifically in the curriculum, in the Mississippi World History curriculum, and we're going to make sure that you're familiar with those places. So here's the world, right? This is what you call a political map, right? It shows the political borders, the borders we have drawn to show who owns what territory, right? This is a man-made kind of view of the Earth, right? You wouldn't go up into space and see that. This is for our own devices to judge, and who owns what, and who has a legal right over it. And real quick on that, if you notice, Antarctica, some people claim, down here in Antarctica, some people claim parts of Antarctica, but there are also treaties that maintain that Antarctica is to remain neutral, kind of like outer space, which is a whole other thing. So what is a map projection? If you think about the Earth, right, it's a sphere, right? And when we look at a map, typically it's on a flat surface, right? Unless you're looking at a globe, which is the most accurate way to look at the Earth, look at a representation of the Earth, right? But on a flat surface, you're going to have to distort the Earth a little bit, right? You can't perfectly show a spherical object on a flat surface. So when you do things to put it on a flat surface, you're going to have distortion. And we're going to look at some ways. If you know, just look at this one real quick. And these are different ways to look at to project the Earth onto a flat surface, right? You can do like a top-down approach, or from the side, kind of unravel the Earth here, right? But there's a lot of severe distortion that happens up at the top. This is all very stretched, right? If you look back here, right, Antarctica is really big here and bigger than it should be, but even more massive here, right? Because these are imperfect projections, right? And this is similar to that one we were just looking at on the last slide. So what are some advantages and disadvantages of this projection? This is called the Mercator projection. Think about it for a second. You may know already about some advantages. Why would they make it like this? Mercator, I believe, if I recall, is the person that made this. Why would he make it like this, so distorted up top? Look how large Greenland is, right? Greenland's not nearly that large, right? It looks like it's almost bigger than Africa. Africa's the second largest continent, right? Africa is massive. Look at Alaska. It looks as big as the entire continental United States, right? That's not accurate. Look at Antarctica, huge. Why do it this way, though? It's very good for sailing, right? This was especially useful in the age of exploration back, 500, 400 years ago. When people were exploring the Earth, you can kind of draw a straight line, and that's fairly accurate. Straight line, basically, on this map of where you need to go. So it's good for navigation, right? But it distorts things like Africa. Right? Look how big Africa is. The United States can fit inside there. India, all these countries can fit inside Africa. Look how massive it is, right? But on a projection like this, it really distorts the shape, the size. Now, some people have speculated, right, that it's a kind of a form of cultural bias where maybe in the past Europeans and Westerners preferred a projection like this because look how big it makes Europe look. Europe is actually quite a bit smaller than that, right? Here's all of Europe fitting in the middle of Africa. Right here, it looks much larger, especially up here. All right, so it distorts the way the world looks. So an advantage, right? Good for navigation. Disadvantage does not accurately show the size and shape of continents and land. Right? There's Greenland again on top of Africa, right? That warping of size. I like this one a lot. This one does a good job of showing relative size, right? In comparing different land masses. It's still not perfect, right? You still get distortion near the top, right? See, all these should be perfectly equal, right? They measure equal distances. As you see, it starts to stretch as you go up. So there's still some stretching, right? But this one is fairly accurate. And it does show the whole Earth. To me, it's about as close as you can get to accurate. This one has been proposed as the most, some people call it the most accurate projection, the best at preserving size and relative size and distance and shape, at least. Right? It goes about it a weird way. It turns the Earth into a triangle, then unfolds the triangle. Again, there's distortion. These boxes should be relatively even, right? Look at how different areas get warped and stretched. But it does show relative size and distance fairly well. Of course, except when you get over here, then the whole Earth gets separated, right? So it's still hard to see that, you go from, if you head east from North America, also that's kind of messed up, right? East is this way. It looks like northeast. If you head east from America, you're going to hit Europe, right? If you on this map, you hit nothing, right? So it messes that up as usual. Why this? This is what we look. This is the kind of like the standard kind of map. It's the Robinson. It's the one I like. Why not this? Right? Why is that so weird? There's really nothing technically wrong with it. It doesn't represent magnetic north, right? But that's just you could argue, just kind of a construct, right? Maybe why isn't it magnetic south, right? Down here could be, and it could be the opposite, right? North could be up here. It's just, some people would argue because, a lot of the times we're going from a Western tradition. Europeans started to draw maps this way. They're oriented on top, right? And others are oriented on the east or on the bottom, right? So that's one argument, right? Because we follow that Western tradition of Europeans, this just looks wrong to us, most of us. Why not this, right? Odd about this. I wonder, who do you think might favor this type of map? Which area of the world, which culture, which country, which people might like this map, right? I would imagine people maybe in East Asia or Australia or Southeast Asia might like this map because they're right, and look at Japan, right in the middle, basically, right? Whereas this map, Europe's right in the middle, basically. This and the United States is on the left. I don't know if that really matters, but so Europeans really like this one, typically, right? They're right in the middle, right up top. This one, they're over here on the left. They're kind of out of sight almost. China and Japan and Russia end up in the top center, right? America still has a good space, right? So instead of chopping in half the big old Pacific Ocean, which has some kind of sense to it, right? It's so big, why not chop it in half? This one chops in half the Atlantic Ocean, and you see how large the Pacific Ocean is, right? So how do we divide the world? These are the AP regions, right? For AP World History, so I'm teaching regular and AP. So if you're in AP, these are more important to an extent. If you're in regular World History, they're also important, but not as important. So these are the way historians and geographers kind of divide the world. Different parts of the world. I'm not going to go too much into depth, But we will reference some of these regions, especially like Latin America, will be referenced quite a bit. East Asia, right? Talk about that a lot. I think I said that already during this presentation. I'm referring to China and Japan. I'll often just say East Asia, right? Because they haven't always been China and Japan, right? Or they were different dynasties. And at one point, or Korea was owned by different places and dominated by different places. So it's more accurate just to call it East Asia or South Asia. It hadn't always been India, right? When I say South Asia, India is the big prominent one, but there's also these other areas, right? Or Middle East. And that term is still commonly used by academics, but a lot of people argue that one is kind of Eurocentric, right? Middle of what? East of what, right? Traditionally, it means east of Europe, right? So it's kind of a Eurocentric term. But it's still it's been so commonly used, it's just still used, basically. I might sometimes refer to it as West Asia, right? Here's East Asia, here's West Asia, or Southwest Asia. But also the Middle East often involves parts of North Africa also, right? This is how the UN, United Nations, defines different areas. It's very similar, very common overlap, right? South Asia, East Asia. They use Western Asia instead of Middle East, right? You could group a lot of this into the Middle East also. North Africa, West Africa. We would call typically Central Africa, East Africa, and South Africa. Southern Africa, at least. And then we already mentioned Latin America, right? Latin America is composed of South America and parts of Central America and the Caribbean, right? So most of this could be called Latin America. But also, you could also call this, that part Central America. And then again, this part is also part of North America. So there's definitely overlap in different areas. Same way there, North Africa, some of it is lumped in with the Middle East. Now, here's some important places you got to know for this class, right? So, in Europe, most of the countries, the big countries in Europe, we will definitely talk about. United Kingdom, right? Where we get our language, right? So we kind of biasly focus a lot on the United Kingdom and its influences, but also in this time period we're studying, starting around the 1700s, they become very powerful and prominent on the world stage also, right? France, the French, Spain, the Spanish, Italy, the Italians down here, Poland, Germany, Russia, big old Russia. We'll talk about the Russian Empire, the USSR, which is the Soviet Union. So Russia goes through a bunch of stages we'll talk about. And the Balkans. This whole area down here is called the Balkans. The most famous country is probably Greece, the most one you've heard of. And there's also all these little countries in the Balkans also. I already mentioned the USSR, big country, part of Asia also, right? Russia always kind of teeters on this line of being part of Europe, but also part of Asia, right? Most of it's in Asia, but they're really kind of considered a European country, depending on who you ask, right? And then also the USSR enveloped a lot of different countries that are independent now, right? It was even larger than it is now. So Russia's currently the largest country on Earth, but when it was the Soviet Union, it was the largest country of all time, I believe. Well, no, not quite. If you count the British Empire, but otherwise. Oh, and there's a email popping up. Sorry about that. All right, Korea over here in East Asia, Japan, the big island country, China, this massive country in East Asia. Got the Pacific Ocean over here. You should be familiar with that already, hopefully. The Philippines, these little island countries down here. A lot of island country. Vietnam, over in Southeast Asia. India, the big country in South Asia, and the Indian Ocean down there. Back to northern Africa. You got the Atlantic Ocean over here. Egypt and North Africa. Israel, this little bitty country, you've probably heard of it, and it makes the news a lot. It's a tiny little country over here in the Middle East, over in West Asia, right? Iraq, we'll talk about. Saudi Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula is this area. Iran and Afghanistan, we'll talk about all those. The Ottoman Empire will come up several times in this class. Doesn't exist anymore, so it's kind of hard to tell you where it is on this map. But it's basically, it's Turkey. Modern day Turkey is what is left over. Kind of, the Ottoman Empire becomes Turkey. But it used to encompass all big parts of this whole area, right? North Africa even used to have parts of like Greece, and it was just all around the Mediterranean. There's Saudi Arabia again. Ethiopia, right? This country, we'll talk about that. South Africa, we'll talk about that country. This whole region is called Sub-Saharan Africa, right? Sub meaning below the Sahara, right? If you know where the Sahara is, it's this big old desert right in the middle, right in the top of Africa. And over to our side of the world, right? Across the Atlantic Ocean, you got the United States. You should all be familiar with that one, hopefully. And our neighbor to the north, Canada. We don't really talk about Canada much, but there it is. Mexico, we'll talk about Mexico. Panama, there's an important canal that's built through there. Cuba, Brazil, this huge country down in the southern part of the Americas. And the Atlantic Ocean over here again. So, and for you to review, right, the places to know, we'll be on a quiz, right? Also, just important to know throughout the class.